My computer. This is weird. My computer's
I open the September 9th, 2024 study session. And it is 6 p.m. on the dot. Before we begin, I want to remind everyone attending this evening's meeting in person that the meeting is being recorded and that this room is equipped with microphones throughout that will pick up any talking. So please refrain from having sidebar discussions that you do not wish for the microphones to record. First thing on the agenda, Sumner Commuter Connector Final Report, Economic and Community Development Director Ryan Windisch.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the City Council. I'm Ryan Windisch. I'm the Community and Economic Development Director and waiting for Jeff to pull up my presentation. Awesome. Thank you, Jeff. So tonight, I'm going to give you, I gotta figure which clicker works here. Awesome. So tonight I want to give you a background on the Sumner Commuter Connector pilot project and really a final report on how the pilot project is turning out. Go over what we learned, because that's why you do pilot projects, really, is to learn from them. And then we will be stopping service by the end of the year. So that'll be part of my presentation. And then kind of next steps and things to be thinking about in terms of transit for Sumner. And I kind of want to start with, this is a pilot project. And when you have a vision like Sumner, we consider ourselves a progressive city. Sumner will set the standard of excellence for a progressive small city, right? You expect your staff to come up with ideas and innovation. And sometimes they work and you learn from them, and sometimes they don't and you learn from them. So way back in 2018, our MIC was regionally designated. So it's a manufacturing industrial center. There's about 17,000 employees up there with a capacity for another 4 or 5 to grow. And as you know, we have a lot of large employers up there: REI, Amazon, Sekisui Aerospace, Costco, and others. And the entire area, 1,800 to 2,000 acres, if you count what's in Pacific, is not served by any regular transit. Pierce Transit does not serve Sumner, does not serve our MIC. And we are not alone. Frederickson, they are struggling out in the county with their manufacturing industrial center, having transit. The Tacoma Tide Flats, not great transit out there. So before I get too far down the road, this pilot project, one of the things we learned from it, and others in the region were also learning from it. So not served by transit, all this employment, and there appeared to be a demand for transit. Many employers have employees who are using transit to commute to work. If you go out and watch any given train coming in the morning or leaving in the afternoon, you will see people on bikes and scooters and walking with backpacks to the train station from our MIC. They arrive at the Sounder station in downtown. They've walked sometimes a half a mile, sometimes maybe 1 or 2 miles. A lot of it's temporary employees. They are having difficulty affording a car. The lower pay bands, entry-level jobs in the MIC. A lot of people have to make a choice. Do I pay for housing somewhere wherever they're able to find affordable housing, or do I own a car? So they attempt to make the journey with transit, and they get to Sumner and there's no connection. The last mile connection is how we typically call it, between the station and their employer. So there appeared to be a demand, and I'm gonna use Councilmember Clerget as part of my story. So I remember being in a meeting with the public workshops talking about snow. It's gonna snow, and the public works crews, their shops is on kind of the extension of 142nd, and there's a pedestrian bridge it crosses over. They said we got to make sure that the bridge is safe because people walk across the bridge to work. So at that point, I thought, wow, there's enough people walking across that bridge that our public workshops are taking an interest in it. So we didn't have any numbers. But it appeared there's a need. So we had a couple of objectives with this pilot project. The first one, make jobs in Sumner more accessible to shift workers, as I've already explained. And then kind of the long-term objective was to, as a pilot project should do, help us understand the situation better. It's a case study, gather data. And as we were looking at the financial side of it, we wanted to see that the shuttle have its costs, offset by riders. But really, the long-term play, if this was to play out the way we wanted it to, was to have employers begin to subsidize and kind of anchor the system similar to what the city was doing. Like an employer would see this thing working, they like it, it's a benefit to them, and they would take it over. But that's not what ultimately happened, but that was one of the objectives. So the operational history for our Sumner Commuter Connector, you've probably seen the bus parked out in the parking lot. It started operating January of 2023. And gearing up to that, we had a lot of interest from employers. We had pursued a couple of grants that we didn't get, but we had employers with letters of support, Sekisui Aerospace, Amazon. And so we had these conversations about ridership, and we're going to get this thing running. The summer before we started in January. And the reason I say that is because there was some lag time. I'll show you the ridership numbers here in a second. So we started operations in January, $6 per ride. That's $12 a round trip. And the employers, we needed to have the employers actually signed up and contracted with BusUp, who's our vendor, in order to have an employee ride. It was intended to be a 12-month pilot. It was going to cost $10,000 a month for the first 6 months, which was really an at cost kind of a deal. And then it was going to go up in the next 6 months. And then all the fares that came in, the $6 a ride, ended up offsetting the city's costs. And I'll show you the graphs in a second, but the ridership was super low at the first part of 2023, mainly because we were having a very difficult time getting Amazon, for example, to sign the contract they needed to sign so that their employees could ride. That just turned into kind of a nightmare. And REI, same thing. And it wasn't for a lack of our vendor putting the pressure on them and me putting the pressure on them. And we were really pushing these companies to get through their processes and get this stuff signed up. So we said, okay, we have really low ridership. Let's drop the fare to $3 per ride. We saw an increase in ridership as a result. Let's make it so anybody can ride. You don't have to have your employer signed up with an agreement. We can figure this out, and people can pay and then hopefully promote it to their employer. So things got better as 2023 went on. And then in 2024, in December 2023, I think those who were on council at that time, remember the conversation we had about the parking garage closing, a good portion of the Sounder parking. Where are people going to park? It could be a potential nightmare. We had capacity to do what we called the cross connector cross town. So we set up a station, park and ride type of station, place to park and ride, and a sign at the Bill Heath Sports Complex in the parking lot. So people on the east side of town who didn't have the option to take the commuter bus from the park and ride in Bonnie Lake down to the station could park in town, or maybe they live south of Highway 410. They could park at the Bill Heath Sports Complex and ride the shuttle into the train station and then ride it back out and then either walk home or some other way. So we had this cross connector that became a second branch of the system, which we heavily promoted. We got outdone though by the Red Apple parking lot over there because they let him park there for free, which is great. I mean, I was on the phone telling somebody if it was up to me, I would park over here for free before I would ride. So that was kind of a wild card that took our demand out for a cross connector. Costs in 2024 went up, fuel prices, whatnot. And The good thing though, in terms of funding, is we did end up with about half of that, $79,000 is being funded for this year's operations by Pierce County. The reason, council member Paul Herrera was confident and comfortable with that is that the demographics of those who are riding, they actually live in Spanaway and South Tacoma. There's a fair contingency of folks who are riding into Sumner and then working in the MIC. So they felt that it was benefiting unincorporated Pierce County citizens. So that's great. We got some outside funding helping offset costs. So here's our ridership numbers, 2023. Low, yeah, we were getting pretty desperate there by April. We need to make some changes. And things got better. And we had some surprises. The truss company that manufactures engineering trusses, wood trusses for, you know, houses and construction is out in the north, is out in the MIC. They had a lot of ridership for us. They had like anywhere from 8 to 10 riders per day for a while. Mostly previously incarcerated folks that didn't have a driver's license. They're trying to get back on their feet. They were the ones who were employed by the truss company, and they rode the shuttle. We've had people from Amazon regularly riding. I have a list of riding, but so things got a lot better. Still not spectacular numbers, but at least we're providing a service. We're getting between, I don't know, $1,000, $1,300 of fare offset a month. So things were continuing to be experimental. We were continuing to promote this. We were not letting up on the employers. In fact, I think we kind of soured some of them because we were pretty persistent in trying to get them to get the word out in their company. And I'll talk about some of the challenges with that as well. So here's our 2024 ridership numbers. Still just under 300 at its peak in March, April. And as you would hope, I guess, the folks who were working for the truss company ended up with driver's licenses and bought their own cars, and they didn't need to ride the shuttle anymore. So the numbers have been going down in that regard. So some of the employers we served that signed up, Delano's, REI, Amazon, National Oak Distributors, and despite their name, what they actually distribute are car finishes and paints. The Truss Company, Pizza Commissary, which makes pizza dough for lots of different places that serve pizza. LKQ, they're a automotive parts warehouse, huge warehouse full of new and used automotive parts. Damco Maersk, they are a logistics company for Walmart. Maersk is big, one of the biggest in the world. Our regular riders, we had 2 or 3 from Amazon. That's been growing a little bit lately. A few from REI. I got Amazon on there twice. I apologize. Truss Company, like I said, was our biggest ridership.
It's longer though.
Yeah, it did. National Oak Distributors, also infrequent, but a steady rider. And then LKQ just signed up a couple months ago for ridership. So we've had a variety of businesses using the service, but not hitting it out of the park for sure. So we did a lot of marketing and promotion. Like I said, we had initial contact with the large employers well before the service even started. We had letters of support, wanting transit service, and we were working our way through getting all these service agreements signed, unfortunately, kind of in that beginning of 2023. We had on-site promotions. I went on-site a couple of times. I don't know if any of you remember the Bus Up representative, Bobby Lauderyoung. Bobby was like a born salesman, and he did a great job, honestly, trying to promote this service at the lunch table with employees, cold calling, knocking on doors. I mean, we did everything we could to try to get companies on board with this. And then the Crosstown Connector, as we were launching that, we did a mailing, 2,600 notices to the residents. We had the reader boards out on Valley Avenue and at the station for a number of weeks. We even did a PCT video promotion, social media, We sat at the station with sandwich boards and answered questions. So we did our best to promote the service. And we've, like I said, made ourselves a bit of a pest with some of the employers, just trying to continue to get them to promote it themselves. So one of the things that, one of the challenges that we had with the employers was they weren't promoting it, like for recruitment. They could have said, hey, we've got this option for entry-level employees for helping save you money to do transit. They didn't seem to like kind of put it on their list. There were programs for subsidizing the cost of the ride through REI, Amazon, LKQ. I think they all have subsidized programs for commute trip reduction. They wouldn't promote those actively like you would hope they would have. So there was like this information gap, which was frustrating because we can't do it for them. They kind of need to do it themselves. So clearly it became apparent that the employers didn't feel like this was something that was really a priority to them. And so they didn't promote it like it could have been promoted. And then before the meeting, we were talking about the fact that a lot of the employees up there too are pretty quick turnovers. And so if you have somebody riding, I don't know if this was exactly the case, but if you have somebody riding and they ride it and they like it, or they learn about it and they're going to try it, and you hope they promote it within to other employees. If they're not there very long, then you lose your salesperson, so to speak. So that wasn't great either. Bus Up did do a survey of riders. They sent a survey out to 76 people who had signed up for a ride at some point in time in the system. We had 8 respondents, and most of those were regular riders. And it was only 8, so you know it's certainly not statistically valid or anything, but it was nice to get some feedback. And what we found wasn't surprising. Things they liked. Hey, I don't have to walk in the rain or snow or ride my bike or whatever. It's a good service for them. Some of them have been even riding regularly for quite some time. The drivers were cordial, and anyway, it was good. It's convenient. It was safe. It was certainly less stressful than driving or some other way to get to work. Things that could be improved: lower cost. I think that's for sure. If this was a free service and a more frequent service that actually lined up with some of the shift work schedules, it was, stretched more into the early mornings and the late evenings, weekends, we would have had more riders. So what's the solution? Expand the service, or work with Pierce Transit, for example, and establish maybe a fixed route bus system, if that's something that could work in the future. So this came out of the surveys of 8 riders who used the system. So some of the takeaways, we did really a lot. I know it's not cheap. Transit is not cheap. When you talk about pilot programs like that Pierce Transit does, they have their runner program, which is an on-demand microbus. It's millions of dollars trying to get that with similar issues. Riders wanted and need more frequent service. Lining it up with a commuter rail time frame isn't ideal. Costco told us, hey, we have 250 employees. Maybe you could have some riders, but we start so early that there's no connection to the train. Okay, that's good news. I mean, that's good information. Bad news, but good information. And that's the same story you'll hear from some of the employers, like in the Tide Flats in Tacoma. The benefit was felt most by the MIC employees. And like I mentioned earlier, we really needed more buy-in from the employers, more real promotion from HR. And I just mentioned the schedules didn't line up. Pilot project set the groundwork for interested. Oh, sorry. Slides that are off the charts here. Pilot project set the groundwork for interest by other MICs to solve the transit problem. For sure, I had Council Member Dave Morrell, who's been trying to get something to happen out in Frederickson. In fact, they funded a system that will hopefully help get employees from Eastern Pierce County over to Frederickson. they're working on something like that right now. I was at some meetings on the Tide Flats transit situation down there. Pierce Transit's expanded their runner program based on some of the feedback we gave them. So it's been helpful, maybe not immediately to Sumner, but definitely helpful in terms of how do we get people to work via transit. And again, just kind of underscoring the need to have the employers really on board with this. And I guess, you know, we thought it would be a recruitment tool as well, like I had mentioned earlier. And the reason I say that is when we had some meetings in the Tide Flats, Concrete Tech is a company in the Tide Flats. They build these giant pre-stressed girders for bridges and whatnot. And they would interview people. About 20% of their employees really need transit. And in their story, they said we would interview people and they would commit to, you know, the job, and we'd ask them about their transportation situation. They would say, I will get to work. They would get to work on time for about 2 weeks, and then something would go wrong. And now they're late. Now they're not dependable, and they get fired or have to leave the job. So, I mean, real life stories about how transit is really necessary and needed. And again, we were able to kind of bring some data to the conversation, kind of our experience. So how do we do? Make jobs in Sumner more accessible to shift workers while helping employers recruit and retain their workforce by eliminating the requirement of a candidate owning a vehicle. We provided a service. We did have some ridership. Some people definitely benefited from who needed it. Long-term objectives: encourage restoration of public transit in the city of Sumner by leveraging the pilot program's case study and data. We definitely have that information. We will use it as best we can to leverage that in the future. Offset the Sumner commuter shuttle costs to local employers, handing off the service to them so that the city can focus on traditional public transit. That did not happen, and it's probably not going to happen because we just don't seem to have kind of the groundswell of support that we need from employers for the system, for anybody to take it over. So kind of what's our future? I don't know if I'm not recommending at this point in time pursuing any of these things, but definitely, you know, being creative on transit options is something we can continue to do. Work with local employers to collaborate or sustain a first last mile program. Kind of done that. Look to intercity options from Sound Transit or Pierce Transit. That's going to require expanding a Pierce Transit service. Encourage or subsidize e-bike and scooter leasing. That's a huge policy question. I don't know if we're going to ever want to do e-bikes and scooter leasing in town. Invest in mobility infrastructure, which we do and have done and continue to do in our plans and transportation planning. For Sumner residents, I think there still could be a demand for folks living, especially in kind of East Sumner, to commute to the train station. I don't know what form that takes in the future, but as we see more multifamily development in East Sumner, we're gonna, I believe, see a demand for some kind of a connection. I'm not sure what that's gonna look like in the future. Weekend service and midday connections would benefit residents. And parking pressures and community hotspots. Depending on if there is parking pressure, there will probably continue to be growing parking pressure. Is there another way to kind of get downtown without driving? Question there. And then I think the biggest takeaway for us looking forward is that Pierce Transit is currently working on updating their long-range plan. And I've had conversations with their senior planner working on the project. And my understanding is they're definitely going to have policy that talks about seriously studying and looking at expanding the Pierce Transit service district back into East Pierce County. So being at the table for those conversations, making sure that policy is in place, I think is super important. If at some point in the future, we're going to go back to the voters and say, hey, you want to be back in this district, it's going to cost X amount of dollars because there's a sales tax. I think there's even a property tax related to that. So it's beginning to lay some groundwork. So wrapping up the project, by November 1st, with a 60-day notification, we'll let the riders that are participating and the employers that are participating know that we're gonna stop service by the end of the year. All the data and different things, the information that's been collected by Bus Up and this whole project, we'll definitely retain that. And we'll get a final formal written report from Bus Up, our vendor, in the Q4. And then, of course, we'll be removing all promotional materials and everything that's out there. It's not a lot, but we have out there, kind of cleaning things up. Kind of a long presentation, but it was kind of a long project, so hopefully
Do you have any
we'll happy to answer questions.
comments or questions? Go ahead, Barbara. All right.
So I was wondering, how many riders did you have from the Heath Sports Complex? Did anybody?
A couple people sign up and take a look at it. Nobody rode it.
And how much was it gonna cost?
It's gonna cost $3 a ride,
Yeah,
so $6 round trip.
okay. And then I know that we spent quite a bit of money on Academy to put in bike lanes, and I haven't seen very many bikes going. Of course, now that the parking garage is under construction, but did you notice any usage of, were bikers using that?
I mean, I definitely see people leaving the station on bikes and scooters. I
Uh-huh.
don't know how many people are using the bike lanes over there. And the other thing that we're planning on doing is, continuing that. I don't know which street it's going down, but I think it's going down Wood. Continuing the bike route, so that future bike lanes and future bike planning would take advantage of that investment on
Oh,
Academy,
okay.
for sure.
Yeah. Okay, all right, well, thanks.
Anybody else? Any? Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you, and thank you for having the faith to let us do a pilot project. Appreciate it. You tried hard.
All right. We will move to 2025, 2026 biennial budget review. Chief Financial Officer Cassandra Raymond.
And bringing guests.
Oh, good. All right, take it away.
Thank you. So we are kicking off our budget discussions tonight for 2025, 2026. So jumping into it feet first, Mr. Steffens will be joining us in
forgot I
just a
was-
moment.
The
Do
presentation,
you have time?
fiddling around getting the door open up. Thanks, Cassandra.
Sure.
He'll be there in a minute.
Here, I can. We go.
All right, there we go.
We're dialed in. Okay.
Not confuse the thing and have two remotes. It's like being at home, right? It's always the wrong remote. Okay, welcome. It is now September, the first study session of September. So normally September is, we're into fall. Changing leaves, maybe cooler temperatures, football, back to school. And for us, every other year, that means budget. So just to kind of remind you, here's the 8 steps of the budget process. Really, we've done the survey, we've gotten the feedback, we've done council priorities. Those were done back at our budget retreat in the spring, May, sounds about right, yep. We've addressed staff needs. I kind of created a draft budget, and now we kind of begin the overview of the council review portion of the budget process. So I think it's important to talk about things that are within our control, within the city's control, within the council's control. So that's, looking at staffing, the number of staff that you have, full-time employees versus seasonal versus hiring consultant labor, all under your control. Timing of doing non-grant funded capital projects, things that we take on that aren't tied to grants, really, once again, under our control as far as when we do them, if we do them, whether we're going to take on any new additional programs, and you know, looking at some limited options for additional revenue that exists. But unfortunately, there's an equally large list of things that are not within our control. As you know, we've been dealing with hyperinflation. It's starting to cool off a little bit. Inflation's going down, but there still is inflation, and there's ramifications from what's happened over the last few years. We still have a challenging labor market. It's important to have good employees and be able to keep good employees. We're dealing regularly with increased construction costs, the availability of getting qualified people to do projects in Sumner. Still have some COVID-related supply chain delays. Things like traffic lights at Wood and Main.
American-made steel.
American-made steel, large vehicle purchases, specialized equipment. While we're getting it, it's taking longer than it used to, at an increased cost. There's also this growing expectation of what the city does. Demands for social services are something that's not new, but it's becoming more and more apparent in the community. And we have to deal with the limitations of property tax, which has been ongoing. So this is just another kind of way of looking at the budget so far. As you mentioned, we had the council retreat, and we'll kind of go over on the next few slides the things that were covered in that. Do you want to talk about the fiscal cliff one for me?
Sure. So the fiscal cliff, this is something that we have been kind of looking at for the past several years. And really, this ties a lot back to our 5-year financial model for the general fund, looking at where those lines cross and where we start to fall off that cliff. And there's a systemic misbalance in how our revenues and expenditures kind of tie out together. Our revenue growth just simply cannot keep up with our expenditure increase. Our property tax, which makes up 21% of our general fund, is capped to a 1% increase over the prior year's collections. That's regardless of our increases in assessed valuation. So we're just looking at the revenue side. Gas prices, unfunded mandates, these are things that just keep going up. We recognize that they're affecting not only our community, but they're also affecting the bills that we're paying as a city. And then just the fact that there's really nothing easy left to cut. We've gone through, we've already picked the low-hanging fruit. Carmen says we've shaken the tree, several times. We have kind of leveraged those community partnerships where we can. We've done that with the senior center. We've done that with our wastewater treatment plant. We've done that with our municipal court and our community court. We try and leverage those grant dollars as much as possible in order to really capitalize and maximize the use of our own internal local resources. But really at this point, there isn't anything programmatic left that we're available to cut even with a scalpel.
There's not a lot of really easy efficiencies out there that can be gained at this part. Maybe there are, but nothing that the three of us plus others have been able to identify at this point. So.
All right. So this is just a quick recap. I wasn't sure if I was supposed to tell you. We're actually changing myself. A quick continuation of the recap of the budget retreat that was back in May. And we put our mission on pretty much every presentation you see, but I am just going to pause on this one because the mission, as we talked about in May, this really drives your budget. This is your identity. It doesn't change from year to year. I believe we've had the same mission statement the whole 18 years I've been here. So I believe this is over 20 years old because it's who you are. It is your DNA. And it's still a pretty good mission statement for us. We provide needed and valued services that promote our sense of community. The mission is who you are. So nothing should be shocking. Nothing should be surprising. That's what we come to work to do every day. And the other reason I'm focusing a little bit more on the mission than we normally do is because Cassandra will talk about later how we closer tied our plans as our goals for our budget. And that's very important. And at the same time, there are a lot of things the city does each and every day that aren't in any plan. We don't have a grand plan that says respond to police calls or provide safe drinking water. These are core services the public relies on us to do. So Some of those things you'll see in the budget still come back to the mission statement there. We didn't take the time to write 200 pages on how we deliver that. Not to knock our plans, Ryan. But the next is our vision, and this is the piece of the city's DNA that is more aspirational. These are the things we may or may not be doing now, but we want to do in the future. And that's we set the standard of excellence for a progressive small city. I remember when I first got here, the city administrator was here when they crafted this and said, yes, they purposefully put progressive and small right next to each other because they felt that was not an oxymoron. A small city did have the nimbleness to be a little more progressive, try things that a bigger city can't do. And I would personally argue we have, even though this is aspirational, we have been doing this over and over. It is why we tried a bus system no one had ever tried before. Before the county, before the port, and before people across the United States had tried a similar system. So that is also part of the DNA of the budget is this vision to set the standard of excellence. We always joke that in other cities, if they say someone's never tried this before, they probably see that as, oh, maybe not. And we always take that as a great, no one's tried that before. Let's get
Plus you save money by having the mayor dig a hole.
digging, planting trees. Yes.
Very cheap. Good labor it is, but.
He said that, not me. The other thing, we always put our mission and vision up. We don't always put in our values, and yet these are what drive us as staff each and every day. It is actually what our performance evaluations are set on, not what are the standard ones? Exceeds expectations, meets expectations. We don't use those. Instead, actually, every single staff person is documented on how they were collaborative and professional or innovative and visionary or responsive and accountable or served with respect and integrity. So those very much are also part of how we get our work done every single day, no matter what you choose to put in the budget or not. And the next level is the council strategic priorities. The council before you 2 years ago really wrestled with this and really looked at them, decided if these were still the priorities, fleshed out a little bit what each of those meant. So we didn't spend a whole lot of time in May reviewing them, but they continue to be tied stronger and stronger and stronger with the budget. In fact, I was just going over what you'll see from Public Works next week, and every single slide talks about which council priorities this project fulfills. So again, this is what drives the choices you have to make, and yes, there's limited funding. Speaking of, so if you took, as I previewed a little bit, we are leaning into our plans and our core services to set our goals. So rather than sit and think of goals to stick in the budget, they're really already outlined for us in the comp plan and the parks plan and the housing action plan and the strategic tourism plan. So those plans go out about 6 to 10 years each, and they outline the goals that you all would like and the public would like the city to accomplish. That big stack of money is what it would cost essentially if we tackled every single one. So, there's a much smaller stack of what we actually have. And then as Jeff said, so much is out of our control. Then there's an even smaller stack that is the discretionary portion of the budget. So you've probably seen as we're explaining the budget to the public as well, we're talking a lot about prioritization. It's why the survey was called the Prioritization Budget Survey. The budget is where you decide in the next 2 years what we can afford to do. And that's actually, well, a municipal budget, except for to Cassandra, might sound a little mystifying to everybody. Everyone can pretty much understand wanting to do more things than you have money for and having to make some choices. Am I going to go on a vacation or replace the refrigerator? That type of thing. So I tried this out when I spoke at the AWC municipal workshop. Let's see how it goes here. How many people have watched Ted Lasso from the council? Dang, okay, not as many as I was thinking.
You're all missing out.
Yeah, it is an excellent show,
Right,
but
agree?
I agree.
so this was a way to try to make the budget more relatable, but it kind of does lose a little bit if you haven't seen the show, but no worries. It can still, any sports team still works. So this was just a different way than we've ever tried to explain budget rules. So you have the fans or the public in our case. they're who we do this for. If you think about any sporting event, baseball, football, it's for the fans. If there were no fans, nobody ever watched, nobody ever bought a ticket to a seat, there would be no reason to go run around a field. So they are who is being served. Same for us. We are here to serve the public. You have very, very vocal fans. I'm sure anyone at the Seahawks game is probably having hearing issues today. But there's also a silent majority. For every fan that's sitting at Lumen Field, there are a bunch sitting at home watching their TV who have just as strong of opinions. And that's the thing with fans. They have a lot of opinions. Just ask any Seahawks fan about the final play of the Patriots Super Bowl and if that should have been a pass play or a running play, and I guarantee you they will have an opinion. You are like the owners in the TV show. That was Rebecca, but for any, Seahawks owners, Jody Allen, any of the sports teams have the owners. They make the policy decisions. You make the decisions on how to fund what you want done. You're looking at the big picture and you rely a lot on technical advice from the people who are down on the field. Then you have the coaches, which in our analogy is the senior staff. In the show, it's Ted Lasso. Calls the plays, makes the decisions on the field, leads the staff, and also has to sit in press conferences and answer to the ownership and the public who have questions. And then you have the players, which is your full staff here at the city who actually execute the work. Sometimes have to make split-second decisions and need the right resources to be able to do that. Have to listen to the coaches, listen to all that training so that in the moment they know what to do and are actually most visible. So in a team's case, they're wearing jerseys on the field and are on TV and are on, if you're Peyton Manning in every commercial. If you are, I'm sorry, I'm a football person, so all my examples are football. I probably I know a little bit. But in our case, our frontline staff wear high visibility shirts that say City of Sumner, and they are out, mowing the lawn or picking up trash or working on a street. And so they are sometimes the more visible staff to the public. So just a little analogy to kind of help define the roles. And if you get a chance, Ted Lasso is a very good show. The second step was the budget survey, and I am not going to spend a lot of time on this because instead of remembering all the way back to May, you have to remember back to last week. So again, I know last week was a long meeting. Thank you for spending 45 minutes listening to the results of the budget survey. I only put one graphic back up as a reminder from 22 when we did it in-house and did not get as many respondents as we did in 24. Again, over 700 responses, which was fantastic. But here's where you'll see, actually the safety feeling went up. Not much, but it did go up. And that did surprise me a little bit. And then you'll see how the top 5 priorities and concerns stayed the same, but moved around a little bit with traffic going up and managing growth going up. So again, not going to recap from a week ago, actually less than a week ago with the holiday. But the survey was an important part. Listening, the input into the budget, though, I just want to make the point is not just from the survey. If you recall the process, that was the first slide tonight. It's ongoing. It's, what we get at the community summit when we ask what's working, what could be better, what could we do to make it better? When we ask those questions at the youth forum, when the mayor visits the senior center and has coffee with the seniors. If you get that feedback sometimes, from your neighbors, sometimes when you're trying to grab something at Fred Meyer and somebody stops you in the checkout line, all of that feedback feeds the budget, not just the formal survey. All right, I think that was the end of my piece.
Okay, so now we're kind of where we are currently in the budget process. So the staff is kind of taking their first crack at what their departments need. Knowing we have some limitations on resources. And I know if Jason was here, he would tell you that he was, and I'm sure the mayor would back me up in the statement that they're quite proud of what the staff asked for. The staff didn't come in, ask for flying saucers and 19 more police officers and all kinds of outlandish things. I think the staff's requests were all very, very reasonable, which I think led to some very tough decisions on which of those reasonable requests kind of got funded and got included in the preliminary budget. So that was part of the executive process. Those were submitted. We had a series of meetings. Oh my gosh, I don't even know how many, but
Every
like
day.
back
Every day.
stacked up for days,
Every day for 3 weeks.
nicely kind of in and around my vacation and Jason and I going to Wenatchee for the city administrators conference. Other than that, it was budget meetings. And like Carmen said, we've kind of adjusted the layout of the budget, and when you get the preliminary budget, I've kind of changed the pages that they're gonna have. I mean, they'll be similar to the way they looked before, but really trying to link them to the long range plans. And we think that it's a great communication tool, and hopefully you will enjoy this change. We've got a balanced budget, which is nice, but you know, there's still some unmet needs. It's not perfect. That's where you all come in. So when we talked earlier, we talked about unfunded mandates. Just some examples here. I'll kind of quickly run through a few of them. You know, electric vehicles. There's a state law that passed years ago where we as a city have to evaluate, and I think the public's asking for us to evaluate, you know, is it time when we purchase a new vehicle, should that be alternative fuel? Should it be an electric vehicle? We don't have a city facility that has charging infrastructure to charge these things. So, I mean, that's a decision point we make. It's not just buying the car, it's getting the infrastructure and doing that as well. We've got changes to leave laws. We have a big change that came down from the ADA and making our website accessible to people that have vision problems, and having narrated text that narrates what's in all the images on the website and our apps when you pay your utility bill. Unfunded mandate, it's going to take a lot of time and money to fix. So kind of what to expect as we work through this over the course of September and October, probably into November. You know, we will have staff presenting. They're not going to cover everything. I don't think you all really care, you know, what the office and operating supply budget is in the legal department as example, because it's not very big. And I'm sure Andrea didn't budget any more than she needed for pen and paper. But you know, really, we're going to cover the high level important items, talking about how those fulfill your strategic priorities, talk about the unfunded mandates and where we have a cost that's tied to that, so you're aware. We're gonna, as always, outline what's an ongoing cost, something that we're continuously having to do, and something that's a one-time cost or a kind of a big program change. We're gonna go over equipment and capital needs, which is always a heavy portion of the budget. Identify some personnel changes. We have a few new positions that have made it into the preliminary budgets. Very few. And then we're also going to go through what was included but wasn't funded. So you have the list of kind of what was left from the chopping block, started with the staff through Jason and the mayor, and kind of what didn't make the initial first round cuts. I think this is yours to explain.
Mine to
These are
explain?
your sheets.
Okay. We're trying something new. Remember, keep in mind that visionary thing. The idea was actually born when you got, I think, the 3-hour overview of our city facilities from Jason a few months ago. And there were so many different projects. And really, the important part of the story is what we have the money to do and what we don't have the time or money to do. So you can see what's falling behind, because especially with something like a facility or a road, the more it falls behind, the more expensive it's getting. So we had the idea to come up with these. We're calling them hot sheets, for lack of a better word, where you just get periodically, and so does the public, a snapshot view of what progress we're making and what's falling behind. So the idea on the left is that the little green, the medium green bars are moving across to the right to show you the progress. So the paint on the senior center is almost done. The ADA upgrades, we made some, but there's still some room to go. Auxiliary power, haven't even touched it. So we did also update this where there's a dark green bar that tells you what we think this 2-year biennial budget will fund. So that way you can kind of quickly see which projects we've been moving on, which projects we have not been able to touch, and which projects this budget will fund to move the needle. Believe me, there was a lot of different forms. There were many different colors. It was hard to track, and it seemed like this was the easiest to get a quick snapshot. And just keep repeating, it's a quick snapshot. It doesn't replace the large planning documents. It doesn't replace a full presentation to give you an update. It's just so you can see a really quick, hey, how are we doing? Oh gosh, we haven't even Haven't even touched the building exceeds capacity on parking for City Hall. Then there were a bunch of things when we were developing this, like I said a couple minutes ago, they're not tied to any plan. Issuing building permits, there's no plan, there's no goal for how many building permits. It's driven by the demand of the people wanting building permits. So there's still a by the numbers, and that kind of gives you a workload idea in numbers. Up and down is not a judgment call. It's not good or bad. It's just telling you if those numbers are moving up or trending down from the previous year. So you'll see the examples there, you know, police calls for service, animal control, the also calls for service, lost pets returned, building permits issued. By the way, these are not the final numbers. Departments are still filling them in, but they give you an idea. So we're hoping that between tracking progress on our main goals from our planning documents and showing our workload through by the numbers gives you a nice snapshot, 2 different ways to see, you know, what workload is driving the city staff or what's falling behind.
Okay, next steps. So Jeff mentioned in the past several months since the city council retreat, it's been a little bit quiet here on here at council on the budget front. There's been a lot of work going on. The departments were asked to prepare their proposed 2025-26 operating budgets as well as capital asks, not only for projects, but for equipment. They had a certain time frame to do those. And then once all that was compiled, Jeff mentioned we met with every single department, sometimes on multiple occasions, with finance staff, their departmental budget staff, and then the Jason and the mayor, and went through those really almost at a line by line detail level, really looking at what are the changes, what are the notable items, if there's a new programmatic request, how does that fit into the council priorities, and really what plan does it help move forward. Those will all be compiled into the mayor's proposed budget that then comes before city council for review and analysis and study and eventual adoption, which means now we start off with a whole lot of activity here at the city council level. So this evening, talking about council's role, kind of the process review, I'm going to get into a little bit of our financial forecast as well as general fund revenues, and also talk a little bit about our indirect cost allocation. On Monday, we'll have a special study session and we'll start our general fund department review going through the departments listed. We also then that Wednesday have a special study session. This is a daytime session between 12 and 5 that will be going over really kind of the public works venue. So we'll be talking about streets, sidewalks, water, sewer, stormwater, our wastewater treatment facility. And that'll be both the operations and the capital side. We'll be coming back to you the next week, talking about some of our remaining general fund departments, community development, senior center and community services, and then starting to discuss some non-general funds, starting off with cemetery, fleet, and metro animal services. A week after that, we'll start looking at information tech as well as parks and facilities capital. As we move into October, we'll start also talking about our property tax levy for tax year 2025. We'll go over some of those remaining funds that are left out there. REIT, our real estate excise tax fund that funds capital projects, as well as debt service, the ARPA fund and building reserves. Mid-October, we'll have a public hearing for our 2025 property tax levy. And then also in October, on that October 21st meeting, we'll be talking about utility rates, any changes, talking about financial forecasts. We're going to be circling back and having the revenue discussion, and then really having that conversation with council on those hard decisions that were taken during those budget meetings, the list of the items that were unfunded, for a council discussion on what council would like to see move forward and what moves forward, how do we fund that and get that accomplished. As we move into November, we have a busy beginning of the month, a resolution for our property tax levy, a resolution for utility rates and utility tax rates. We'll be having a public hearing. We'll have the first of 2 public hearings for the 25-26 budget. We'll also bring you a budget wrap up. And then as we're also talking about 25 and 26, I'll be bringing forth a final budget amendment for 2023-24.
And we canceled a happy Thanksgiving, so we're not having a happy Thanksgiving. So we've canceled that.
And then right after Thanksgiving, we'll have our second public hearing on the 25-26 biennial budget. And then we'll have a special meeting on December 9th to adopt that budget. You know, there's not a whole lot of play in the schedule, but we're happy to get as in-depth as anyone would like. You know, you're always welcome to ask me questions. I'm happy to go over line item detail or answer any other questions on revenue sources or expenditure trends. We do have to adopt by December 31st. So that is a hard deadline under state statute. Without that adoption by December 31st, we do not have the authority to spend any money as of January 1st. And now I'll start talking about the financial forecast. I actually, you know, I love this time of year. I kind of want to just start playing, you know, it's the most wonderful time of the year in the background, but it might just be me.
You're the one that canceled our happy Thanksgiving.
So we have a lot of funds in the city. We have 26 appropriated funds. All of those are accounted for with their own set of revenues, expenditures, and fund balance. But the one we find ourselves talking about the most is the general fund. The general fund it accounts for everything that's not otherwise accounted for somewhere else. When we talk about our special revenue funds later on in the coming months, you know, special revenue funds are funded by very specific revenue streams, and they're restricted to certain expenditures. Capital funds are funded by generally either transfers or grants or some other restricted revenue. Enterprise funds, that's our water, sewer, storm, cemetery, metro animal services. Those are funded by user fees. So the user fees are set to cover the cost of that function. And then our internal service funds, the expenditures are programmed, and then we have rate models that take all their expenditures and assess them out to the users' departments. Everything else goes into the general fund. This is the revenue streams into the general fund are generally non-restricted. So these are what's used for the general operations of the city. A couple of different revenue categories here. Our biggest one is sales tax. It accounts for about 39% of our overall revenue into the general fund. We have, we average between 25 and 31% on a monthly basis of our sales tax is remitted by five businesses in the city. So as always, you know, we're always encouraging economic development because the more we can do, more we can diversify that number, really the more consistency we have in our sales tax. Property tax, again, it's limited to 1%. It's 1% of the prior year's revenues. It is not 1% on the increase in assessed valuation. It literally is you take prior year's levy, multiply it by 1%, and then add in the value of new construction and improvements. Our assessed valuation of our manufacturing center is roughly equal to the assessed valuation of our residential district. And so really what that means is we understand and we recognize that having the MIC has an impact on our services, has an impact on our law enforcement services, has an impact on our traffic, on our road maintenance. But we also, on the flip side, need to recognize that they are also participating in funding that through the assessed valuation in their property taxes. Residents in special purpose districts benefit from the overall revenue stream. I know when residents get their tax bill, and I'm one of them, my first thought was, oh my gosh, why is it going up so much? And really what we try and explain a lot through our property tax process is only a small portion of the property tax is attributable to the city of Sumner. We have a portion of that property tax stream. The rest of property tax is made up from just multiple special districts. It's the school district, it's fire, it's Pierce County, it's the state, it's the library district. You know, there's a variety of things that make up that overall revenue stream. We also look at charges for services. These are services that the city provides. The largest type of charges for services that we see into the general fund are our development related revenues. So this is things like building permit fees, zoning and subdivision review fees, plumbing permits, mechanical permits. And then we have utility taxes. Utility taxes are a percentage on the gross revenue of a utility, whether that be electric, gas, refuse, water, sewer, stormwater, or telephone. For the most part, those are limited by statute. So electric, gas, telephone, and refuse are limited to 6%. Water, sewer, and stormwater don't have a statutory limit. The statute says that it has to be reasonable. So reasonable is a judgment call. I will say that we're on the low end of that. We've actually kind of pegged that at the same 6% as the statutory limit for the other utilities. When we look at some of our neighbors, they can be upwards of anywhere between 10 and 12% on their utilities. Sales tax, being that largest revenue source, is honestly the one that we scrutinize the most. Property tax, it's easy to track. You know, we know what our property tax levy is. It's considered almost 100% collectible. We know what the cash flow is going to be based on when Pierce County collects the property taxes and remits it back to us. Sales tax is a whole other ballgame. Sales tax has a 2-month lag between the activity and the receipts. And so we're always running a little bit behind on doing those forecasts and looking at the trend analysis. We do share a detailed report monthly with the Finance and Personnel Committee. That's a report that we do based on limitations that we get from Department of Revenue. Anyone who's privy to that report and that information does have to have a form on file with the Department of Revenue and with the city that says, I promise I'm not going to use this information. But we do share that detail on a monthly basis with Finance Committee. And we get into not only the top 5 remitters, but also what the trends are, any other notable remitters, what we're seeing as far as line item detail. We also track our sales tax in 2 ways. We track construction-related sales tax because that really is kind of a separate forecasting methodology versus all the other sales tax. Construction-related sales tax is considered a one-time revenue. You know, we don't have unlimited and eternally renewable buildable lands. And so that construction revenue, that construction-related sales tax, we do track differently. Our non-construction related sales tax, we have seen a flattening in 2024, starting actually in a little bit in 2023. But through the pandemic, we actually did very well. You know, we had a very low interest rate environment. We had, okay, just lost the word, but we had government, help me out here.
Is it like the stimulus money?
Thank you, stimulus funding. That was, and we had people that were working from home and were doing a lot more, honestly, online shopping. It was, and so we were seeing 10, 12% increases of sales tax year over year. We knew at that time, and we discussed at Finance Committee, that those kind of increases were not going to be sustainable, and we expected to see that flattening, and we are seeing that flattening. Our January through August receipts are roughly flat compared to 2023, so we're not seeing those continued lifts, and down about 2% compared to 2022. Our construction-related sales tax, though, is where we're really seeing an impact. We are down 40% from 2023 numbers for January through August receipts. A lot of that is directly attributable to the really high interest rates that we have going on right now. We have developers who are, they've got projects in the pipeline, but they're either not willing to look at takeout financing, or they are just waiting until the interest rates correct a bit before doing that, and really to improve their pro forma numbers. So we have seen that impact not only in our sales tax, but we've seen that impact in our development revenues as well. And we can see, looking at this graph, I think this is a great little bit of information, just because it's showing that top line is 2022 actual, the kind of mint line is 23, and then that bottom line is 2024. And it really does show that even though the numbers are a bit down, the patterns of spending are still relatively consistent. And so we know that as we're doing our forecasting, we've always been very conservative in our forecasting. You know, in prior years, that's been great because we were super conservative in forecasting. We were having 10% lifts, you know, and we would end up with a little bit extra at the end of the year. That conservative forecasting is staying in the budget, but now we know that our conservative forecasting is going to get us more where we're probably going to end up and have a little bit less of that flexibility at the end of the year. The other place that we have seen an impact of those interest rates and of the current economic environment is in our development fees. Our 2023 fees are significantly below our forecasts by the tune of about $600,000 due to high interest rates. We've made that adjustment already in our general fund financial forecast. We are starting to see things loosening up a little bit as we're hearing from the Fed that interest rate cuts are looming. We are seeing some of that start to loosen. We've had a couple of building permits come through. So we are seeing our 24 numbers start to kind of approach what our forecasts were, but it's still not going to make up for that drop that we had in 2023 when we look at the biennial budget as a whole. But again, as our interest rate environment moderates, what we're hearing from the developers is we should start seeing those projects start to turn dirt. And really, we see the impact in our sales tax, we see the impact in our development fees, but we also see the impact just in the timing of our development services activity. Because just because the permits aren't being pulled and we're not seeing the dirt turning, there's still a lot of work being done in development services to get those projects through the review phase to a point where we do start to see them out on the ground. The last thing I wanted to talk about as far as these go is our indirect cost allocation plan, the ICAP. This is a requirement that the state auditor's office really started emphasizing kind of around 2017, 2018. Actually, beginning even before that, earlier on in that decade. But what they were seeing is municipalities across the state were charging their utility funds for more of a portion of their general fund costs than really could be substantiated. So they said, you can do that. You can charge your user funds, specifically your utilities or your other enterprise funds, for kind of their share of administrative costs, but you have to be able to show your work. And okay, so in 2018, so I believe our first one was in 2012, we worked with a consultant to do a rate model that was updated in 2018, and we just completed a new update, actually just a couple of months ago. Worked with the same consultant, so they had a good amount of history with the city. And really what the goal of the ICAP is to take those administrative costs, so legislative, executive, legal, human resources, communications, and parcel them out to what is a general fund cost or what is a general governmental service cost, and what costs are more directly attributable to the utilities so that the utilities are capturing their fair share. And then that's charged back as an assessment from the utilities back to the general fund. The reason that I really want to highlight this here is because that has a revenue impact into the general fund. Our 2023 assessment, which was our 2018 assessment just lifted annually for inflation, was about $1.15 million. The new ICAP model assesses the utilities by almost $2.6 million. And really what that is, and this is a graphic that Carmen came up with, I think is absolutely fantastic, but it really shows that as the demands for services throughout the city go up, we always tend to think of what those direct service roles are. Public works, so roads, utilities, CD for planning, police for safety and animal control. But there's also a big impact on those administrative departments that are providing the services to those external direct service departments. So legal, the amount of contracts and the amount of property acquisitions, the amount of internal counsel, admin, finance, the amount of finance staff time in tracking grants it's significant. You know, it's an important part of what we do, but it takes a lot of time. IT, looking at tech and safety, fleet for vehicles, communications for graphics and engagement. And really what the ICAP does is it helps capture the cost to the user funds, specifically water, sewer, and storm, of these kind of indirect internal services. As we move into more of the financial model, just a quick note, 23-24 biennial budget will be coming back with a final budget amendment at the end of the year. Because we did see the flattening in 2023 of the development services revenues, and then with the flattening that we've seen a bit in the sales tax, we're likely to dip into our fund balance by about $200,000. That's, I never like dipping into fund balance, but that's a pretty immaterial amount. And
Fires morning.
yeah, and that really is a limited scope. That if we start seeing those development services revenues kind of rebound over the next couple of months, if we start seeing our sales tax start to rebound and come back a little bit over the next couple of months, we could easily just wipe this out and it be even at the end of the year. 25-26 revenues, we budgeted conservatively, anticipating a slight rebound in both development and sales tax revenues as we see those interest rates start to moderate and correct. And then we'll, of course, keep monitoring that in 2025 and adjust our service levels if necessary. When we look at the general fund financial forecast, this, I recognize this a lot of numbers. This is actually fed into by a line item analysis of all general fund expenditures and revenues. So we take a look at every single line item, make a determination on if it is over or under. We want to know why. We want to know if we need to make any corrections. And then we also look at the lifts out from 25-26, and then what we expect out 27 through 2030. And we can see if we look at the revised 2024 column, about midway down, the operating excess and deficiency, right now, the way things are sitting, we would be looking at about $120,000 dipping into fund balance. And then 25-26, we're balanced to the positive. That being said, that was with making some hard choices during those budget meetings that will be coming back to council for consideration as we wrap up the budget process. But where we really start to look at where those lines cross, where revenues no longer are meeting our operating expenditures, and we start to cross those lines in 2027. And what that's telling us is we still have a systemic balancing problem with having our operating revenues cover our operating expenditures. We have a fund balance availability where you can choose to use fund balance to cover that. But council policy has always been, and it's a good policy, is that our operating revenues cover our operating expenditures. We've already stripped out we've already taken advantage of as many efficiencies as we've been able to identify. We honestly see, without a legislative fix to the property tax, or without the identification of a new revenue source, or making some programmatic changes, at that point we start looking at levels of service. And that's something that will continue to be a policy discussion between now and frankly 2027. It's of course not something we want to leave until the 12th hour, December in 2026, having that conversation. It's something that needs to be brought up and put on our radar now as to when those lines cross. And that's something that we've been talking about for several years. This is just that in a graphical form, again, showing those lines begin to cross in 2027. And then council strategic reserve. This is another topic that we'll be bringing back as part of our property tax discussions. This was a tool that council approved in the fall of 2017 to begin in tax year 2018. It is reauthorized annually through the property tax levy. So it is called out in the property tax levy that a certain levy amount equal to $350,000 annually will be held for council, essentially for council to be able to appropriate during either the budget process or through a budget amendment. And you can see here what we've accumulated as well as what we have identified uses for. So with the current uses identified, and that was at $1 million that was allocated to the Winter Project at Heritage Park. $300,000, that was the interim improvements at Heritage Park, the amenities at 902, 906 Kincaid. $114,000 was appropriated this year. That was for design of the Washington Street improvement. And then anticipating an ask of $970,000, and this would be for the construction of the Washington Street improvement. So leave your balance at the end of this year at a little over $1 million. And then at the end of 2025, after the Washington Street use, if that is approved through the budget process, about $419,000. And then again, upcoming meetings, went through these earlier, but we've got a busy September. What you'll be seeing is a slide deck that includes what the department or the fund does, what those unfunded mandates are, some notable items that were in the budget, if any hard choices were made, and what council strategic goals it hits. I'm always happy to go over line item detail. At any time, you're welcome to ask questions at Finance and Personnel Committee, or just even shoot me an email or give me a call, and I can go over any detail that you'd like. I'm happy to, that was a lot of information. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Add real quickly, our plan for giving them the information. I think at this point, the plan is to give you
Yes.
the upcoming meetings information. So like at the end of tonight, you would get the stuff for the meeting of the 16th. So you'll have some time to go over and review it before we give the presentation. So it won't be the first time you're seeing it. So we'll kind of piecemeal the budget as we go, giving you a section at a time. It's a little bit easier to digest than a big giant book, having to go through and find what section we're talking about which night. So that'll be how we're gonna.
So are there only like 2 daytime?
Yes.
Yes.
The other reason for getting the presentation a little bit in advance is if you do, I'm sure you'll eagerly read through it before the multi-hour meeting. But the other thought is because it's high level and because there's a lot of other details the staff might have, if you happen to see something that you already know you have a question on or might want a little more information on, if you want to give staff the heads up on that, then they can come to that meeting prepared to share it.
What is the second daytime? I know on the.
September 18th is from 12 to 5. I believe the second daytime meeting is not budget. I believe it's comp plan. So I don't have it
It's in
listed on.
October.
Yeah, I don't have it listed on here. Because it wasn't a budget meeting.
We're trying to do this comp plan because all the other meetings are dominated by the budget. So you put the comp plan on the afternoon.
October 16th.
Can't wait.
Okay, I think that's all we have for you tonight.
I believe we are planning on serving lunch on the 18th.
Yes.
Let's see.
Lunch on the 18th. That'll get some of you there.
Steak lobster.
Yay, nice. It's starting at noon. You better serve.
All right.
Any other?
Any questions for them? Yes.
Comment, go ahead.
I think that you always do such an awesome job, both you guys. We'll include Jeff too.
Thanks.
But I really appreciate your visuals. I always call them, they're at a glance charts for me. So I can look at it at a glance and it's about that long and I've formulated it. And I will appreciate getting the stuff ahead of time because we do read it, and so then that way, because as some of you know, I'll ask, and I like numbers as well. And so I'll start asking questions just so I can track with you because you've got this brain that just, and so I'm trying to keep up with it. And so I have to ask those questions, but I think it was a great job. You did a great job. Brian did a good job. You guys did a great job. This is a lot. So thank you.
All right. Anybody else have another question? No? All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
I will adjourn this meeting after I'm done. And I think, does anybody have any agenda issues?
No, we've got backfill people for the meetings.
No agenda issues down here, none?
No.
Okay, all right.
You're still covered.
Yeah, Thursday.
Are we good?
Do
Do you have a report? Yeah.
This meeting is adjourned at 7.